The rain had been falling since dawn, painting the small town of Portland in shades of gray and silver. Through her living room window, Emma Reed watched the drops trace delicate paths down the glass, blurring the world outside. She had always loved the rain, but lately, it only reminded her how quiet her life had become. 3 months earlier, Emma had packed her things, left the apartment she once shared with someone she thought she'd grow old with, and moved into this small, weather-worn house on Maple Street. It wasn't much: 2 bedrooms, a creaky porch, and a tiny garden that refused to grow anything but weeds, but it was hers. For the first time in years, the silence inside belonged entirely to her. She worked from home now, editing travel articles for an online magazine. Every morning she made coffee, opened her laptop, and tried to lose herself in words about faraway beaches and mountain trails. But no matter how beautiful the destinations sounded, they all felt like stories from another life, a life where she still believed in happy endings. Her friends called often at first. They told her she'd done the right thing, that she needed space to heal, that she was stronger than she realized. She smiled through every conversation, promising she was fine. But when the calls grew less frequent and the evenings stretched longer, the truth became harder to ignore. She wasn't lonely for people. She was lonely for connection, the kind that made the world feel bright and meaningful again. One Friday afternoon, the rain stopped for the first time all week. Emma decided to step outside, hoping the fresh air might clear her thoughts. She wrapped a scarf around her neck and sat on the porch steps, breathing in the scent of wet earth and pine. Across the street, children were splashing in puddles, their laughter rising above the hum of traffic. She smiled, remembering how she used to find joy in small moments like that. She was reaching for her coffee mug when she noticed someone walking toward her. This man carrying a dark umbrella. He wasn't rushing like most people did when it rained. He walked slowly, as if he didn't mind getting wet. When he reached her gate, he gave a polite wave. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm and clear. "I think this might be yours." In his hand was a small umbrella with faded floral prints, the one she had left at the cafe a few days earlier. She blinked in surprise. "Oh my goodness, yes. I thought I'd lost that. Found it by the counter," he explained. "The barista said it belonged to the new woman on Maple Street. I guessed that might be you." She laughed lightly. "That's me, guilty as charged. I'm Daniel," he said, offering a friendly smile. "I live 2 houses down." "Emma?" she replied. "It's nice to finally meet someone from the neighborhood." Daniel nodded, glancing toward the gray clouds. "It's a good day to stay inside. But I guess I'm one of those people who likes walking in the rain." "Then you're braver than I am," Emma said. "I only like watching it." For a moment their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, not attraction, not even familiarity, but a quiet recognition, as if two people who had both known loss were silently acknowledging it in each other. After he left, Emma found herself thinking about his calm voice and the gentleness in his manner. It wasn't excitement she felt, it was comfort, the kind that reminded her that not every stranger carried a storm with them. That night, she wrote in her journal something she hadn't done in years. "I met someone today. Just a neighbor. But for the first time in a long while, I felt seen." The words startled her. She closed the journal quickly, embarrassed by her own honesty. Still, the feeling lingered over the following days. Emma noticed Daniel often. He jogged early in the mornings, always stopping to greet the mail carrier. He mowed the elderly couple's lawn across the street without being asked. He seemed to belong to the world in a way Emma had forgotten how to, once. She saw him pause outside her fence to admire the broken-down rosebush she'd been meaning to fix. He smiled at her and said, "You just need a bit of new soil. Roses can surprise you when you give them another chance." It was such a simple sentence, but it stayed with her long after he walked away. Maybe he wasn't just talking about the roses that evening. Emma made herself tea and watched the sun set behind the clouds. The golden light reflected off the puddles in the street, turning them into tiny mirrors. Somewhere, faint music drifted from an open window. For the first time since moving here, she didn't feel like an outsider. She still missed the life she'd lost. Of course, the plans, the laughter, the certainty of having someone beside her. But she began to wonder if maybe the emptiness she carried wasn't a curse. Maybe it was space waiting to be filled again with friendship, hope, or something yet unknown, as she turned off the lights and prepared for bed. Emma caught sight of the umbrella Daniel had returned. It hung by the door, a quiet reminder that small acts of kindness could open unexpected doors. She smiled to herself, unaware that this simple encounter would soon unravel a truth she never saw coming. Truth that would change the way she looked at love, trust, and the people who walk into our lives when we least expect it. And with that thought, she drifted to sleep, while the rain began again, outside, soft, rhythmic, almost as if the world itself was whispering, "Something new is beginning." The next few weeks settled into a quiet rhythm, the kind that only small towns could offer. Emma still worked from her little kitchen table, but the days no longer felt endless. Each morning, she noticed Daniel jogging by with his golden retriever, waving before disappearing around the corner. Each evening, they exchanged small greetings, small smiles, not slowly, small pieces of their lives. It started with simple things. He offered to help her carry a heavy box from her car one Saturday, and she offered him a cup of coffee in return. That cup turned into a shared afternoon on the porch as the sun painted the sky with warm oranges. Daniel talked about how he had grown up not far from Portland, about the summers he used to spend fishing with his father, and how he'd once dreamed of being a musician. Emma listened, surprised by how easily he spoke, like he wasn't afraid of silence. When it was her turn, she hesitated. She had spent so long keeping her story to herself that saying it aloud felt like reopening a door she had locked years ago. But Daniel didn't rush her. He waited, sipping his coffee, eyes kind, until she finally spoke. "I used to paint," she said softly. "Before life got complicated." "What happened?" he asked, not prying, just curious. Emma looked down at her mug. "I stopped believing anything I made was worth finishing." Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Maybe you just needed time to miss it." Those words stayed with her long after he left. The next morning, she found her old paintbrushes tucked away in a drawer. The bristles were stiff, the handles faded, but something about holding them again stirred a familiar warmth inside her. That evening, she set up a small canvas by the window and began painting the view outside the streetlight. The wet pavement, the faint glow of Daniel's porch across the road. She didn't think about perfection or mistakes. She just painted what she felt as the colors began to blend. She realized she was smiling. Their friendship deepened naturally after that. Sometimes they met at the cafe where she had once left her umbrella. Other times, he'd stop by her porch after work. Still in his gray sweater, holding 2 cups of coffee, they talked about everything childhood dreams. Books they loved, the things they wished they'd said to people they'd lost. Daniel had a way of listening that made ordinary moments feel significant. Emma noticed he often spoke in past tense when talking about his home. "I used to live with my sister near the river. I used to play guitar with friends every Friday." Something in his tone always carried a trace of distance, as if part of him was somewhere else, caught between yesterday and today. One evening, as they watched the streetlights flicker on, Emma asked, "Do you ever miss who you used to be?" Daniel gave a faint smile. "Every day. But missing isn't always bad. Sometimes it reminds you that you once cared deeply about something or someone." She didn't press him for details, though curiosity tugged at her heart. She could sense there was a chapter of his life he wasn't ready to share yet. And maybe that was fine. They both had pages they weren't ready to reopen. As autumn crept closer, their friendship became part of her daily rhythm. Daniel's dog, Charlie, started waiting by her gate each evening, wagging his tail until she came outside. Emma would laugh and bring out a small treat, pretending it was for Charlie, even though she knew Daniel noticed her small gestures. They began taking evening walks together, sometimes talking, sometimes simply listening to the sound of their footsteps on the damp sidewalk. One night, while walking past the park, Daniel told her about his mother, who had passed away a few years earlier. "She was the one who taught me to see the good in people," he said, "even when they disappointed her." Emma nodded, her throat tight. My mom used to say something similar. She told me to give people space to grow even when it hurts. They walked in silence for a while after that. The kind of silence that felt full rather than empty. Emma found herself thinking about Daniel more often than she intended. She liked how his laughter came easily, how he never tried to impress anyone, how his eyes softened when he talked about the people he cared for. But she also sensed something unspoken, a quiet boundary that neither of them dared to cross. She caught herself wondering if he was lonely too. The air had grown crisp, carrying hints of autumn leaves and the faint scent of wood smoke from the chimneys across the street. Emma had settled into her new rhythm, painting in the mornings and working in the quiet afternoons. But some evenings felt incomplete, as if a piece of the world was quietly missing. It was one of those evenings when the twist of fate arrived, completely unannounced. Emma had decided to stop by the local bookstore to look for a gift for a friend. The bell above the door jingled as she entered, and the warm, familiar smell of paper and ink immediately settled her nerves as she wandered past the shelves. Scanning titles, her eyes caught a familiar figure in the aisle ahead. Daniel. Her heart skipped a beat, though she tried to remain composed. He was holding a stack of books in his hands, his brows slightly furrowed as he flipped through a poetry collection. Emma paused, unsure whether to call out or simply watch from a distance. And then, as if noticing her presence for the first time, he looked up. Their eyes met, and a small, knowing smile spread across his face, soft, warm, yet tinged with something deeper she couldn't quite name. "Emma," he said, gently lowering the books. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Daniel," she replied, feeling her chest tighten in a mixture of relief and something more unspoken. "I just came for a gift." "I didn't know you liked poetry." He chuckled lightly. "I don't usually, but sometimes it helps me make sense of things. The things I don't say out loud." Curious despite herself. "I think I understand that." For a moment, the world felt suspended quiet, except for the faint rustle of pages and the hum of the heater. Emma realized she had missed his presence, his quiet energy. It's the way he seemed to make ordinary moments feel meaningful. Then Daniel gestured toward the front of the store. "Do you want to walk outside?" "The leaves are really beautiful this evening," Emma agreed. They stepped out onto the sidewalk together, crunching through a scattering of golden and red leaves. The setting sun cast long shadows, painting the street in warm, fleeting light. They walked in silence at first, letting the sounds of the town fill the space. Then Daniel spoke softly, as if sharing a thought he had been holding back. "Do you ever feel like the universe puts people in your path when you least expect it?" he asked. Emma glanced at him, catching the slight hesitation in his voice. "I do," she admitted. "And sometimes I wish I had noticed sooner." He looked at her for a long moment, as though reading between her words, then smiled faintly. "Sometimes noticing isn't the hard part. Sometimes the timing just isn't right." Emma swallowed, the weight of his words pressing gently on her chest. She thought about the past weeks, the small gestures, the laughter they had shared, the way she had begun to rely on his presence more than she realized. All of it suddenly felt fragile, beautiful, but uncertain. A sudden gust of wind sent leaves tumbling around them. Daniel bent down to pick one up, holding it between his fingers as he looked at her. "It's funny how small things can remind us of bigger truths," he said quietly. Emma smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes fully. "I think you're right." And then, as they reached the corner near her house, Emma noticed something unusual: a child running toward Daniel, a little boy with dark hair and a shy smile. Tugging at Daniel's sleeve, Daniel froze for a moment, a mixture of surprise and hesitation crossing his face. The boy glanced at Emma, then back at Daniel, and whispered something she couldn't hear. Emma felt a flicker of curiosity, an unexpected twinge of sadness. She realized that Daniel's world wasn't just her quiet street, just their shared afternoons. There were pieces of his life she didn't know, stories he hadn't shared. And yet, despite that, she felt drawn even closer, as if this small twist of fate had given her a glimpse into the life he carried quietly behind him. Daniel knelt down, speaking softly to the boy. Emma couldn't hear the words, but she could see the tenderness in his gestures. For the first time, she noticed how naturally he connected with someone younger, how careful and gentle he was. Her chest warmed with admiration, tinged with a pang of longing she didn't fully understand. When the boy ran off toward the bookstore again, Daniel straightened and looked at Emma. "I didn't expect to run into him tonight," he said, his tone thoughtful. "He's my nephew. My sister asked me to pick him up for a few hours. It's complicated, but I promised I'd make sure he got home safe." Emma nodded, realizing her imagination had filled in 1,000 possibilities she hadn't known were lies or truths. "I see," she said softly. "You have a lot going on." He gave a small, sheepish shrug. "Life always does, doesn't it? But I like these moments too. The quiet ones. The ones I get to share with someone who doesn't need to know everything about me." Emma's heart lifted in a way she hadn't expected. This encounter, so simple, so ordinary, had reawakened feelings she had thought she had buried. The bond they shared, the trust they had slowly built, felt alive again, vibrant and delicate all at once, as they said goodnight. Emma walked slowly to her door, feeling a mixture of hope and unease. She couldn't stop thinking about Daniel's soft smile, the way his eyes lingered on hers, the gentle vulnerability he carried like a shield. And somewhere deep inside, she realized that life had a way of nudging people together, not forcefully, not dramatically, but quietly, with timing so precise it felt like fate. Emma closed the door behind her, the faint sound of leaves rustling outside her window. She didn't know what the next days would bring. But one thing was clear. Something had shifted tonight. Something neither of them could ignore. Something that promised change and, perhaps, a beginning she hadn't expected. The days after the bookstore encounter felt strange yet familiar. Emma found herself glancing out her window more often, as if expecting Daniel to appear without notice. And in a way, he did, passing by her porch with his calm, unhurried pace. The same gentle smile that made her heart lift just by seeing him. But despite the closeness they shared in small moments, a quiet tension lingered in the air. Neither spoke of the feelings building between them. Each smile, each pause in conversation carried the weight of words left unsaid. Emma felt it in her chest, a mixture of hope and fear. Daniel felt it too, though he never allowed it to show fully. One afternoon, she decided to take a walk in the park. The trees were alive with the colors of early autumn, leaves glowing gold and copper in the sunlight. She often came here to think, to sort through the jumble of her own emotions, and to try to understand the pull she felt toward Daniel. To her surprise, he was already there, sitting on a bench by the pond, tossing breadcrumbs to a small group of ducks. He looked up as she approached, and for a moment, neither spoke. "Hi," Emma said softly. "Hi," Daniel replied, his voice low, almost hesitant. She took a seat beside him, careful to leave space, as if the distance could contain the feelings that neither dared speak aloud. "You've been busy," Emma said. Breaking the silence, "I've been thinking," he answered, his gaze fixed on the rippling water. "About life, about choices, about things I've left unfinished." Emma's heart tightened. She knew exactly what he meant. She had been thinking about it too, though she could not find the courage to name it. "There are moments," she said slowly, "when I feel like words are too small, too weak, to describe what we feel, what we notice, what we wish we could say." Daniel's eyes met hers, and for the first time in weeks, he didn't look away. There was an honesty there, raw and unguarded, that made her chest ache. "I know," he whispered, "and yet we don't say them." Emma nodded, biting her lip. She wanted to tell him everything, the way her heart beat faster when he laughed, the way she noticed the little kindnesses he offered others, the way she imagined what it might be like if he were fully present in her life, but she didn't, because speaking it aloud felt like stepping off a cliff without knowing the landing. Daniel's hand brushed against hers, almost by accident, and they both froze. Neither moved, neither withdrew. The small contact was enough to communicate everything they hadn't dared to say. A gentle warmth spread between them, full of unspoken longing. I think, Daniel began, his voice almost trembling, that the hardest part isn't feeling something for someone. It's knowing we can't fully explore it. Not yet. Not safely. Emma swallowed, nodding. She felt that weight to the invisible walls they had built around themselves, the circumstances that kept them from simply admitting the truth. I wonder, she said quietly, if it's possible to feel so strongly for someone and still do nothing, because it isn't the right time. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He simply looked out across the pond, the sunlight catching the edge of his hair, making it glow. Emma studied him, noticing how even in moments of hesitation, there was a strength in him, a gentleness and care that seemed to belong to another time, another story he hadn't yet shared. After a long pause, he spoke again. It's possible, but maybe the waiting, the silence, it teaches us what we really value. It reminds us that some feelings are worth protecting, even if they hurt. Emma nodded, her throat tight. She understood. She also knew that every small gesture between them, every shared glance or quiet conversation, carried an intensity neither could ignore. They were dancing around emotions far larger than themselves, restrained by circumstance and respect. They left the park together in silence, the kind of silence that was full, not empty. Each step felt cha. The rain had returned to Portland, soft and persistent, drumming against Emma's window as she sipped her tea. She watched the droplets tracing delicate paths down the glass, each one a tiny mirror reflecting her thoughts. Lately, she had thought about Daniel more than she would admit his quiet kindness, the unspoken connection they shared, and the lingering feeling that something important was just beyond reach. That evening, as she bundled herself in her coat, she noticed a light on in his window across the street. He was moving about, gathering things, speaking quietly to himself, perhaps just thinking aloud. She hesitated, unsure why she felt the urge to step outside. But the streets were empty, and the rain was gentle, and somehow it felt like the right moment. By the time she reached his porch, the door was already open. Daniel stepped out as if he had been waiting for her. His coat was damp, hair slightly tousled from the rain, and there was a weight in his expression she hadn't seen before. "Emma," he said, his voice soft but deliberate. "I wasn't sure you'd come out tonight. I couldn't stay inside," she admitted. Her hands were tucked in her pockets, but her chest felt exposed, as if every heartbeat could be heard. It felt like something needed to be said. Daniel nodded slowly. "I've been thinking the same thing. About us. About everything we haven't said." Emma's breath caught. She had rehearsed 100 ways to speak, 100 ways to keep her heart safe. But now that the moment had come, words felt insufficient. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the subtle tension in his shoulders, the way his hands hovered at his sides, almost hesitant to reach out. "Emma," he began, his voice breaking slightly, "I can't keep pretending that I don't care about you. I care more than I should. Maybe more than I ever realized I could." Emma's heart pounded. The words she had longed to hear, feared to hear, now rested gently on the air between them. She wanted to speak, but the emotions were too large, too sudden, and she simply nodded, letting him continue. "I've been careful," Daniel said, voice steadying, careful not to cross boundaries, careful not to make promises I couldn't keep. "But every day I see you, I feel this pull, this connection that I can't ignore. And I realize tonight can't hide it anymore. Not from you and not from myself." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. She had thought about these words for weeks, imagining them, fearing them, hoping for them. And now that they were here, she realized she felt lighter, as though a weight she had carried for months had been lifted. Daniel," she whispered, "I feel it too. Every day, I feel it. And I was afraid that it was one-sided, or that speaking it aloud would change everything." He reached for her hand, gently taking it in his. The warmth of his touch grounded her, and the connection they had nurtured in quiet moments suddenly blossomed into something undeniable. "Emma," he said, "I don't know what the future holds. There are parts of my life I need to figure out, things I need to fix. But I know one thing: I don't want to hide how I feel anymore. I can't imagine my days without you in them." Her heart swelled. She squeezed his hand, a silent promise, a recognition that she had waited for this truth just as much as he had. "I've been holding back too," she admitted. "I thought if I stayed quiet, I could protect myself. But all it did was make me miss the moments we already have. And I don't want to miss any more." For a long time they stood there in the rain, holding hands, neither needing to speak. The world around them, the dripping eaves, the rustling leaves, the distant hum of the town seemed to fade, leaving only the quiet certainty of what they felt. Finally, Daniel spoke again. "We don't have to rush anything," he said, his thumb brushing over hers. "We can take it slowly, but I want us to be honest fully from now on. No more unspoken truths." Emma smiled through tears. "I'd like that," she said softly. "I want that too." And just like that, the invisible walls they had built around their hearts began to crumble. For months, longing, hesitation, and unspoken words had shaped their connection. But now, the turning point had arrived. They were no longer held back by fear or circumstance. They had spoken their truth. And in doing so, they had opened the door to something real. Something tender, something alive, that as the rain continued to fall. They walked slowly back toward their street side by side. Each step felt lighter than the last, as if the world itself had shifted to make room for what had finally been acknowledged. And in that quiet, emotional moment, Emma realized that some truths, once spoken, had the power to heal, to lift, and to transform. The turning point wasn't just Daniel's confession. It was the recognition that love, even quiet and cautious, could finally be embraced without fear. For the first time in months, she felt hope, not the fragile, distant hope she had carried before, but a steady, bright hope that this story, their story, was only beginning. The first snow of the season had fallen overnight, dusting the quiet streets of Portland with a delicate layer of white. Emma stood by her window, sipping tea and watching the flakes drift lazily from the sky. The world outside looked calm, peaceful, almost magical. And for the first time in months, she felt the same way inside. Daniel appeared shortly after, his familiar figure crossing the street to her porch. He carried a small paper bag, which he handed to her with a gentle smile. "I thought you might like something warm," he said. And inside were 2 steaming cups of cocoa, topped with a swirl of whipped cream. Emma smiled, her chest lifting with the simple act. "You remembered?" she said softly. "I try," he replied, shrugging with a playful grin that only made her heart beat a little faster. They stepped outside together, their boots crunching in the fresh snow. For the first time, the air between them felt light, easy. The heavy weight of unspoken feelings, hesitation, and longing that had lingered for months had been released, replaced by a quiet, mutual understanding. "Do you ever think about how long we spent just waiting?" Emma asked, blowing gently on her cocoa. Daniel looked at her, eyes soft. "I do, but I think we needed that time. To understand what we truly wanted. To appreciate the moments when we were together, even quietly." She nodded. "I guess that's true. Waiting made me notice things I might have overlooked: the way you care for others, how gentle you are, the little ways you make life feel lighter." "And I noticed you," Daniel said, his voice low but certain. "The way you see beauty in small things, how patient you are with the world, how you don't give up, even when life has been hard. Those things stayed with me every day." Emma felt a warmth rise in her chest, a quiet affirmation of all the emotions she had carried so carefully. She realized, in that moment, that love was not always loud or dramatic. It could be steady, patient, and nurturing, growing quietly until it could no longer be ignored. They walked together down the snow-dusted street, side by side, neither in a rush, neither needing words for every thought. There was a comfort in silence now, a language built from shared glances, gentle touches, and the knowledge that they had finally crossed the bridge from longing to honesty at the corner park, where autumn leaves had once rustled under their feet. The snow now blanketed the benches and paths. Emma paused, taking in the quiet beauty of it all. "Do you remember when we first met?" she asked, a soft laugh escaping her. "You returned my umbrella, and I felt like the world had suddenly made a little more sense." Daniel smiled, his eyes reflecting the falling snow. "I remember. I didn't know it then, but that small moment, it changed everything for me, too." Emma reached for his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. "I think some things are worth waiting for," she said, "even if it takes months to realize them." Daniel squeezed her hand gently. "Yes, and some people are worth taking the chance for, even when it's uncertain, even when life is messy." The snow continued to fall, soft and silent, covering the world in a gentle hush. Emma leaned her head slightly toward him, feeling the quiet security of someone who truly understood her. And Daniel leaned just a little closer, acknowledging the bond they had forged on in dramatic declarations or grand gestures, but in patient, heartfelt connection later. Back at her porch, they set the cocoa down and watched the night deepen. The streetlights reflected off the snow, turning the world into something magical and still. Emma felt a sense of completion, not just of the story she had lived, but of the emotions she had nurtured. Daniel looked at her, a smile playing on his lips. "I don't know what the future will bring," he said softly, "but I know this: we found something real, something that isn't rushed, something that's ours." Emma smiled back, her eyes glistening. "I don't need to know everything yet. I just know I'm glad we didn't give up on this, on each other." They stood there for a long moment, hands clasped, hearts quietly aligned. It wasn't about dramatic endings or sudden twists. It was about a love that had grown in silence, survived hesitation, and now existed openly and honestly as they finally turned toward their homes. The snow falling steadily around them, Emma realized that life didn't always provide perfect timing, but it did offer second chances, subtle nudges, and moments of courage that could transform longing into something beautiful. And in the quiet of that snowy night, with the world calm and still around them, Emma and Daniel knew that some stories didn't need fireworks to feel complete. Sometimes all it took was honesty, patience, and the courage to finally speak the truth of the